favorite all-time carols. Always a lovely part of preparing for the holiday season. And as many of us know, the holiday season and bereavement are very difficult together. I'm Len McEwen. I hope you'll take time over the next little while to listen to this recording and to hopefully take away some information that may be of help to you if you're grieving, remembering a loss during this holiday period. We're going to spend some time today to talk about many of these things. The fact that grief makes us ill at ease because we don't know what to do. One of the things that, of course, happens with grief and loss is that as we experience it, many of us lose parts of our short-term memory and definitely our ability to focus. For those of us who are supporting others, we have to remember that grief may be the result of many things, not just the death of an important person in the person who is suffering's life, but it may be loss of friends because they've died, or perhaps because they've moved away, or maybe an argument, the loss of these friendships, the loss of pets. As a pet owner myself, I can tell you that pet loss to me is a major milestone in my life. And so I hope during the next period of time we're going to talk about some of these important events. We have to remember that in these years, we've lost many of the rituals that used to be associated with grief and loss. Perhaps the most profound example is the use of celebration of life as opposed to funerals. Funerals served man for millennia, ever since man existed. In fact, the first communities were actually cemeteries. But recently, largely because we're death avoidant, we tend not to have funerals. We don't want to associate ourselves with the pain and suffering that comes with experiencing grief. And so many of our celebrations don't include a body. In fact, direct dispositions are growing in numbers every year. Direct dispositions being the phone call that goes to the funeral home that says, so-and-so has died, and I'd appreciate it if you'd pick up the body and, just cremate them, and we'll have a celebration of life later. And so we miss all of the beauty, if one can use that word, associated with gathering together with friends and family to support each other during a time of grief. We have to remember, too, that we're a generation that may not have experienced grief and loss, as people, through the advances in medicine, are living longer and longer. And our parents may not have taken us to funerals, as for many years the current thought or thinking was that children didn't need to or shouldn't attend funerals. And therefore we have no knowledge of what funerals are or how we should behave, what we should experience. And so they are clouded in mystery. And that mystery is also potentially frightening to people who haven't experienced a funeral. Because of this lack of support, there's an incredible price paid by those people who are bereaved. So today we're going to discuss some topics, an overview of grief and loss, the difference between grief and mourning. We'll make use of some of Alan Wolfelt's reconciliation needs. Alan is a person who I was fortunate enough to meet some 20 years ago and have attended his Center for Loss in Colorado. If you have opportunity to receive training from him or to attend his center, by all means, take advantage of that opportunity. We'll talk a bit about death symbols. Death symbols, the one that comes to my mind is the armband that has ceased to be employed these days. If there's time, we'll talk of the Mourner's Bill of Rights and then helping yourself heal during the holidays. During this, I hope to talk about children, because children are often forgotten during the holidays if there's been a significant loss and they have been a part of it. And we'll talk about what we can do to help friends. So as we transition, perhaps we should understand what grief is. Grief really is our internal feelings that are generated by the loss of someone important, or perhaps a favorite pet, or perhaps a job, a marriage. These inward thoughts are not shared. They're kept to ourselves. They allow us to think about what has happened and place ourselves in that context and think about our future within it. So it's what we do when we experience a loss. Mourning, on the other hand, is a very social activity. It's the outward expression of all of those inward experiences of grief. We have to be active in our grief in order to get over it. It's through mourning that we're assisted by rituals such as funerals and wakes, which over the millennia have been designed to allow us opportunity, an audience, if you will, to let us tell the story of our relationship with the person or item that is no longer with us. And it allows us to begin the first task of moving on, which is changing our relationship with that person to a relationship with that person's memory. Linking objects are a part of that process and an important part. A linking object is something that takes you back to the memory of the person. For me, it's a little nabob coffee spoon that was in our family forever and my mother used. Everyone will have their own linking objects. And so mourning, with the support of others and with tools such as linking objects, it allows us to create an opportunity to reconcile our loss. There are steps along the way. The first one is just envisioning, seeing ourselves in the situation with the loss, and then encountering the loss, becoming a part of what's going on, and then finally reconciling with the loss and seeing ourselves in our future without the person who has died. Moving away from the reality, the numbness and the shock is the evasion component. The encounter, acceptance of the new reality, moving from a relationship to a memory. Of course, the newness, adjusting your life to a life without the person, but rather with the memory. For some of us, this may take years to accomplish, and it requires that we make choices. So Alan Wolfelt talks about the 6 reconciliation needs that we need to undertake in order to embrace the loss and begin to move forward. The first is acknowledging the reality of the death. And For some, this may take weeks and months. For others, it may take years. I worked with a young woman who, 3 years after the death, was still carrying the cremains of her husband with her, and used to go into a coffee shop, place his cremains on the table, and have coffee with him in the mornings. Before we can acknowledge the reality of the death, we are probably going to try and avoid the reality. And we may be confused and need to replay the death, as this woman did. She told the story of the death over and over. But at some point, we begin to embrace the pain. And please remember, these are not linear. You may be embracing the pain as a part of acknowledging the reality of the death. In doing so, in embracing the pain, we're going to try and repress or deny, depending on our culture, what has happened. We may need to dose ourselves. That is, accept the death in small components. We need to create a safe place to experience the pain. And we have to avoid statements like, oh, carry on, or chin up, or you're doing so well, or you're lucky to have had him. It was God's will. You can still have other children. Those are just so difficult for people who are experiencing a loss. Remembering the person who has died. So this is where we move from the relationship with the person to a relationship with the memory. And this is where we rely on things like linking objects. I have my father-in-law's watch. My father-in-law and I had a very brief relationship, but I had a great deal of respect for him. And when he died, I received his watch. It was a big, clunky old wristwatch, and I can remember how important that was to me, because it allowed me to sit back and remember him and how he took me out golfing. He was a great golfer. Unfortunately, for many people, when there's a death, the current thinking is, well, we'll just clean out his room and get on with life. And in doing so, we remove our opportunity to save linking objects. I can remember attending a work site where a young man had died, and the family had come out to clean out his locker, only to discover that the company had had all of his work clothes dry cleaned. And I can remember his mother breaking down and crying because she was looking for the smell of her son. We have to develop a new self-identity. I bumped into a woman this morning who had just lost her second parent. And she was in tears, struggling with her new identity of being an orphan. That was true for her, but our new identity may involve other things, social things, financial things, recreational things. A woman who counted on her husband to always drive the motorhome now needs to learn how to do that driving if she intends to use it for vacations. Choices. Do I want to be a widow, or what do I want a widow to be? And then, of course, the search for meaning. How could God let this happen? Our search for meaning may be endless. Receiving ongoing support from others, and for many people this is very difficult, but this is a major influence in our capacity to heal, because not only do we need the social connection and all of the physiological, social, and psychological benefits that brings, but it brings to us the experience of others. During this time, we often look at all our friends and decide who we will continue relationships with and who we won't, who has supported us and who hasn't. In our culture, many corporations allow us 3 days off when a close family member has died. From my own experience, I can tell you that when a family member of mine died, I took 4 or 5 weeks off. And then when I returned to work, it was probably another 4 weeks before I was truly productive. Of course, we have to look at safety and confidentiality when we look at receiving support from others. Then we have to reconcile our grief, recognizing that we don't get over it. Current literature suggests that we grieve for 3 to 5 years. But really, we grieve for the rest of our lives. Our coping mechanisms just kick in. We still may experience grief bursts. Grief bursts are, well, I'll tell you a story that exemplifies a grief burst. When I was a child, my mother would come up behind me and grab me in her arms and rock me back and forth and sing Mares Eat Oats and Does Eat Oats. Satellite radio has a channel that plays hits of the 40s, and every once in a while I'll tune into it, and sometimes Mares Eat Oats and Does Eat Oats is on their playlist. And when it's played, I'm instantly taken back to those days. It used to be that I would tear up and have to pull over to the side of the road if I was driving. But these days I look forward to it because it allows me to revisit my relationship with my mother, a very important person in my life. Which takes us to death symbols. Now, why would we want to talk about death symbols at Christmas? Well, death symbols are really a part of our history. They've been around forever. Examples include things like keening. Keening is a form of expression of emotion taken by groups such as the Italians, where usually senior people in the community will make up poems spontaneously about the person who has died and yell them out. Laments, same thing. Mourning bands I talked about earlier. All of these are used to signal that we're in mourning, and therefore we're fragile and maybe vulnerable, and that, our situation would be helped by people supporting us. They also signify shared loss, and I remember the Queen Mother's funeral. And as the TV cameras scanned the grievers in Great Britain, many wore black armbands, signifying the loss. And why do we do that? Well, it allows us to tell people that we are vulnerable and their support would be helpful to us. And so if somebody comes up to us and says, what's the black armband for? We can say, I wear that in honor of my brother who has died. And thank you for asking, but I'm pretty vulnerable right now and I don't want to talk about it. Or we can say, his name was Fred and he was really important in my life. Let me buy you a coffee and I'll tell you his story. But these aren't encouraged in our society today. When it comes to the holidays, we are supposed to be upbeat and happy. And none of those really are happy things, although as life progresses, we tend to remember some of the happier events related to the relationship we had with a person who has died. We always have to remember that love does not end with death. and that all of the trappings of the holidays trigger memories for us. There is nothing that can take away those hurts. Gradually, we can hope that they will be transformed into moments of remembrance. How do we do that? We talk about our grief. We have to be able and feel supported and safe to talk about our feelings. Safety is a key issue. But we also have to look after ourselves first and be tolerant of our physical and psychological limits. It takes huge amounts of energy to do grief work, and so self-care is really important. We have to lower our expectations of our own behavior and performance. Wherever possible, we need to eliminate unnecessary stress, including isolating yourself. That's one of the key things. Mourning, being with others, social situations are often very helpful to us, but we need to dose ourselves as we do that. That dosing allows you to have that special time for yourself, because keeping busy won't help you. You will still visit your grief, and it may, in fact, increase your stress. Choose who you're going to be with. Be with comforting people. Remember, good tidings of comfort and joy. Remember, too, that people who understand what's going on for you will understand that the holidays may increase your sense of stress. And so you want to associate with people who will let you talk openly about your feelings, especially about your loss. Talk about the person who has died. Use their name. Remember, this is about you. So do what's right for you during the holidays. Don't let your well-meaning friends and family prescribe for you. This is about you, not them. Find that safe person, that trusting friend. Let them help you clarify your desire for the holidays and share your decisions with your family so that they can be a part of your solution, not your problem. Plan ahead for family gatherings and decide on which traditions to continue. These are your choices. Structure your time. You don't want to be caught off guard and forced into a panicky situation or an anxiety situation. You don't want to deal in fear because you're already feeling grief at a heightened level. Always make sure there's flexibility in your plans. Embrace your treasure of memories. Write them down. Use your linking objects. Share the memory with friends, both happy and sad times. Remember, it's okay to cry. Renew your resources for living. Time spent thinking about the meaning and purpose of life. Take an inventory of your life and where you're going. Define the positive things and look at your choices for not only expressing grief and loss, but for your future. Address your faith. Renew it if it's been left idle. Discover a new set of beliefs, perhaps a new sense of creator. Attend services or ceremonies if faith is important to you. Remember that grief is both a necessity and a privilege. It comes as a result of giving and receiving. If we did not love the person who had died, we would not experience grief. Don't let others take it away from you. Love yourself. Remember, you are the most important person on earth, because if you don't look after you, you won't have anything to give to anyone else. Be patient with you. Allow yourself to be surrounded with loving and caring people, and be careful about who you select to be loving and caring with you. Remember the children. As adults, we have to remember, if we have children, it's our role not only to be careful with what we do with ourselves, but also to make sure that we teach our children. Teaching our children about grief and loss and about how to grieve. There are handouts on bereavementsupport.net under the heading Grief Words that may be of help to you, or check the Rainbow Society. Their website may be of assistance to you as well. Help a friend if you know of one who is grieving. By listening with your heart, be present for them, physically and psychologically, emotionally. Demonstrate a desire to listen to them as they tell the story of the person who has died. Be compassionate. Allow them to express feelings without fear of your criticism. And avoid cliches. These can be really painful. Understand the uniqueness of grief. Nobody does it the same as somebody else. Allow them to teach you about their grief. This is Wolfeld's companioning model. Don't try and lead them through grief. Rather than walk beside them. Allow them to teach you about how they are experiencing grief. Offer practical help. I can remember when a friend of mine had a heart attack. I couldn't find the family. They were at the hospital. It had snowed that night. And I couldn't think of what to do. I wasn't family, and I couldn't visit him in the hospital. And so I shoveled their walks. Practical help. In North American culture, for years, it was take food to the family. This allows us to connect with the family in useful ways. Make contact. Sea tuna casseroles. They're really great when you're grieving. Write a personal note. This is almost a lost art these days with the instantaneous communication through email, but pick up a pen and write a note. Use the name of the person who has died. So many people don't do that. Share a treasured memory that you may have. Of course, during the holiday season, we are aware of holidays and anniversaries, but also remember them for birthdays and Father's Day, Mother's Day, etc. Help them if they are considering a ritual or tradition of some sort, and understand the importance of the loss. This loss may be for them a shattering experience. Over the years, one of the things that I've done that I've found really helpful, they've allowed me to revisit memories of people who have died in my life, and that's to write a poem. Now, I'm not a poet, but here is a simple method of creating a poem. Put down a noun, then two adjectives, the first word ending in ing plus some other words, then some adjectives, and then a noun. Mother, young, old, teaching the stuff of life, forgotten, wanderer, mum. I wrote that just after my mother's death. It's amazing. I still have it. That's decades ago now. Music. Music is a great healer. If you don't know what to listen to, look at the healing music of Mozart or perhaps Gregorian chant, or consult things like the Tao of music or sound psychology, music lists for memory and meditation. Dose yourself with music that is emotionally emotive. Music. As you go through this time, if you're looking for additional resources, consider Alan Wolfelt's website at www.centerforloss.com. Please note that center is spelled C-E-N-T-E-R, not the Canadian way. A book that I found helpful, although it's not specifically aimed at the holiday season, is The Mourner's Dance by Catherine Aschenberg, a brilliant woman who I have enjoyed meeting. The Mourner's Dance, What We Do When People Die.